Have you ever stopped to think about the depth of the mysteries surrounding the figure of Mary, the mother of Jesus? In a world where the extraordinary often blends with the ordinary, Mary stands out as an enigmatic and essential figure in Christian tradition. But what do we really know about her beyond the sanctified images and traditions that surround her? Imagine diving into a story that spans centuries, where each detail reveals a new layer of meaning. From her young marriage, in accordance with the Jewish traditions of the time, to the formal recognition of the Assumption in 1950, Mary is a character whose life and legacy have been shaped and reinterpreted over time. And what about the late references in the Gospels? They not only add depth to her image but also challenge our perceptions of how history is told and understood. When discussing Mary, the mother of Jesus, history seems to fade into a misty mystery. Researchers like André Chevauderies and Michel Medeiros highlight an intriguing fact. Historical sources about Saint Mary are incredibly limited. This scenario is fascinating because it reveals an intriguing gap in the historical documentation of a figure who played such a crucial role in Christian tradition. Imagine, for a moment, that we're in an archaeological research setting where, despite deep excavations, material about Mary continues to elude scholars' grasp. It's almost as if history is whispering but never fully revealing. This historical void not only intensifies the aura of mystery surrounding Mary, but also makes her story a captivating enigma for historians and theologians. Reflecting on this, we consider how the scant sources have shaped the narrative about the mother of Jesus. If we think about the influence of these gaps on our understanding of Mary, we'll realize they offer an opportunity to explore what we know and what remains to be discovered. For instance, instead of lamenting the lack of information, we can view it as an invitation to delve deeper into our research and seek new perspectives. This challenge encourages us to think critically and explore beyond established boundaries. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. The solution may be more intriguing and rewarding than we imagine. However, these historical limitations can also serve as a valuable reminder of the importance of preserving and recording our own history. By understanding the impact of limited historical sources, we become more aware of how our own stories and traditions can be preserved for the future. For example, have you ever thought about how your own memories and experiences can be recorded and preserved for future generations? This can inspire us to create more detailed records and value the individual narratives that make up the grand mosaic of history. The significance of studying scarce historical sources also opens a range of questions about how we build knowledge. If Mary, the protector and mother of Jesus, has such limited historical presence, what does that tell us about the construction of historical narratives in general? Are there other figures in history whose importance has been underestimated or whose stories have been distorted? Considering these questions, we are led to explore more deeply how narratives are formed and how gaps in history can influence our understanding. As the mystery surrounding Mary intertwines with the following topics, it becomes evident that the quest for answers about her life and role is an ongoing journey. In the next topic, we will delve into the first mention of Mary in the Scriptures, an early glimpse that may offer additional clues about her significance. Thus, the narrative unfolds intriguingly, revealing further layers of a mystery that continues to fascinate and inspire. The first mention of Mary, the mother of Jesus, occurs discreetly in the Scriptures, which is quite interesting considering her importance in Christian tradition. The Apostle Paul references Jesus' birth in a letter to the Galatians from the 1st century, but curiously does not mention his mother's name. Imagine the scene, one of the earliest Christian documents talking about such a crucial event but not giving due attention to the central figure involved. This omission highlights a fascinating aspect of how history was recorded and how important figures can sometimes be marginalized in early narratives. This absence of direct mention makes us reflect on how the perception of Mary, the protector and essential figure, was shaped over time. Although Paul did not mention Saint Mary's name, this does not diminish the importance of her role. Rather, it may heighten our interest in understanding how and why this figure became central in Christian tradition. We can compare this to how certain details are left out in stories that later become iconic, revealing more about the context and evolution of narratives than about the figure itself. This first mention, without Mary's name, can be seen as a clue about how narratives concerning important figures were handled at the time. Perhaps the absence of the name reflects a deeper understanding of the importance of the message over the person involved. This phenomenon invites us to reflect on how our own communication might focus more on ideas than on identities, especially in contexts where shared understanding may be more relevant than individual recognition. Furthermore, the lack of direct reference to Jesus' mother may open doors to a broader discussion on how female figures were treated in the Scriptures and the society of the time. Does the absence of Mary's name reflect a broader cultural perspective on the role of women, or was it a conscious choice by the writers? This type of questioning can lead us to explore how historical and religious narratives shape our understanding of female figures and the roles they play in society. As we advance in exploring Mary's life, the first mention is just the beginning of a deeper journey. Next, we will delve into the Jewish tradition and how Mary, despite her absence in some texts, likely followed the practices of the time by marrying young to Joseph. This perspective will help us better understand the cultural and historical context that shaped Mary's life and set the stage for future discussions about her figure. The Jewish tradition of Mary's time shaped many aspects of her life, including her marriage. It is widely accepted that Mary married Joseph in her teenage years, in line with the common practice among first-century Jews. This detail might seem trivial at first glance, but it's crucial for understanding the cultural and social context surrounding the mother of Jesus. Imagine a young woman entering into an arranged marriage at a young age, with the expectations and responsibilities it entailed. Mary, as a central figure, was embedded in a society that highly valued marriage and family building. Mary's young marriage to Joseph reflects the social norms and traditions of the time. For us today, it may seem like a distant reality, but understanding these practices is essential to appreciate the context in which Mary lived. Just as in various cultures around the world that still maintain similar traditions, young marriage in ancient Palestine had profound implications for a young woman's life. Mary, as a crucial part of this tradition, represented the continuity of cultural and religious practices that influenced not only her personal life but also her significance in religious history. These practices also help us understand Mary's role as a wife and mother in an environment that valued the continuity of family lines and adherence to religious precepts. Mary's young marriage not only shaped her personal life, but also played a significant role in the religious narrative. Imagine how Mary's daily life must have been influenced by her responsibilities as a wife and future mother in a society that had specific expectations for women's roles. Understanding the cultural and historical context of Mary's marriage allows us to see how these traditions influenced her life and role in history. Reflecting on this, we can consider how traditions and social norms shape our lives and the choices we make. For example, just as Mary followed the norms of her time, many of us follow cultural traditions and expectations that shape our daily lives and decisions. This leads us to a deeper reflection on the influence of traditions in our personal and social lives. As we move forward, the story of Mary and Joseph prepares us to explore more deeply how Mary's figure was portrayed in the Gospels. These texts, written decades after Jesus' death, offer a more detailed look at Mary's life, but always through the lens of the evangelists. In the next topic, we will examine how the later Gospels address Mary's figure and the impact of this representation on our understanding of her life and role. The figure of Mary, the mother of Jesus, becomes more prominently featured in the Gospels, but it is important to note that these references appear decades after Jesus' death. Mark, the earliest Gospel, dated to the 70s of the first century, is a clear example of how the narrative about Mary was shaped over time. Imagine the Gospels as documents that were transmitted orally before being written down. They are like a lens that focuses and refocuses Mary's role as the decades advance. This late approach of the Gospels is crucial for understanding how Mary's image was developed and adjusted over time. The fact that references to Mary in the Gospels appeared many years after the events they describe does not diminish her importance, but raises interesting questions about how memory and tradition influence the narrative. For example, it's like a story that is told and retold in a family. Each generation may add its own details and interpretations. What is fascinating here is to observe how Mary, the protector and central figure, fits into this evolving narrative and how her importance is highlighted and adjusted to reflect the needs and perspectives of Christian communities over time. These later Gospels provide a more detailed perspective on Mary, but it is essential to recognize that they were also shaped by their own cultural and theological contexts. The way Mary is described in Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John is not just a reflection of her real life, but also a theological and communal construction. Imagine these texts as mosaics that capture not only Mary's life, but also the beliefs and practices of the Christian community that produced them. They help us see how Mary's figure was interpreted and incorporated into developing Christian beliefs. This late context also leads us to reflect on how narratives can be shaped by collective memory and theological goals. If we think about our own lives, we are also influenced by how others perceive and recount our stories. Just as the Gospels shaped Mary's image to align with their beliefs and needs, our own stories and memories are shaped by the perspectives of those around us. This makes us think about how we are seen and remembered by others and how this influences our identity. As we explore Mary's figure in the Gospels, we are building a foundation to understand how the Jewish conception and Mary's role in Jesus' moral upbringing were addressed and reinterpreted. The next topic will delve deeper into Mary's role as a Jew and her influence on Jesus' moral development, providing a fuller view of her importance and impact. Want to dive even deeper into biblical themes like this? Check out our exclusive ebook in the comments. It offers a detailed analysis and spiritual reflections that complement this video. Don't miss out. Download your copy now. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was Jewish and lived according to the traditions and norms of her culture. This detail is crucial for understanding Mary's role in Jesus' life, as well as the importance of the moral education she provided. In a Jewish context, Mary was not just a maternal figure. She was a protector who, by following Jewish practices and values, shaped the environment in which Jesus grew up. Imagine the scene: a young woman, embedded in a rich and complex tradition, playing a central role in shaping the future spiritual leader. This is not only fascinating but also essential for understanding the cultural and moral foundation upon which Jesus built his teachings. Mary's role in Jesus' moral education is often underestimated, but considering her position as a Jew, we see that she was the guardian of a tradition that deeply valued ethics and morality. The way Mary educated Jesus in Jewish scriptures, stories, and laws was fundamental to the development of his principles. Think about how parents today pass on values and teachings to their children. Mary's influence on Jesus' moral formation is a powerful example of how family education can shape a person's character and vision. This understanding of Mary's role leads us to reflect on the impact of cultural traditions on the formation of our beliefs and values. Just as Mary passed on Jewish values to Jesus, each of us is shaped by the traditions and beliefs we are raised with. It's like a tree with deep roots influencing the growth of its branches. By understanding this dynamic, we can more deeply appreciate how cultural and familial traditions play a crucial role in shaping our identities and values. Mary's role also reminds us of the importance of recognizing and respecting the traditions that shape our lives. Whether in a religious or cultural context, these traditions have a significant impact on how we view and interact with the world. Reflecting on Mary's influence on Jesus' life, we can find inspiration to value and better understand our own traditions and how they shape our lives and actions. As we advance, we will explore the complex figure of Mary and how her image evolved over the centuries. Mary's trajectory as a protector shows how her figure was reinterpreted and shaped by different traditions and ecclesiastical dogmas. We will dive into this evolution to better understand how Mary's image was constructed and adjusted over time. The image of Mary, the mother of Jesus, is one of the most fascinating and complex aspects of Christian tradition. Over the centuries, this figure has evolved significantly, shaped by a series of ecclesiastical traditions and dogmas. Initially, Mary was seen as an ordinary woman with a life reflecting the Jewish traditions of her time. However, over time, her figure began to gain additional layers of veneration and reverence, transforming into a symbol of purity, motherhood, and protection. This process of transformation did not occur uniformly. Mary's image was reinterpreted and adjusted according to different traditions and ecclesiastical contexts. For example, over the centuries, she was associated with attributes ranging from being Jesus' simple mother to a nearly divine figure, intercessor, and protector of the faithful. This phenomenon is similar to how cultural icons evolve over time, moving from historical figures to symbols carrying various meanings. Mary's complex figure also leads us to reflect on how the perception of public figures can change over time. Just as Mary was reinterpreted and adapted to the needs and beliefs of Christian communities over the centuries, historical and cultural figures in our own lives are also frequently reinterpreted as new perspectives emerge. This reminds us that how we see and understand people and events is often shaped by the cultural and historical context in which we live. The evolution of Mary's figure also highlights the importance of adaptation and change in our own lives. As we face new experiences and contexts, our perception of ourselves and others can evolve and change. This can be seen as an invitation to embrace flexibility and adaptation in our personal and spiritual journey. Just as Mary transformed over the centuries, we can also find ways to grow and evolve in response to our experiences and contexts. As we move forward, the next topic will take us to explore the dogma of the Assumption of Mary, formalized in 1950 by Pope Pius XII. This dogma, which celebrates Mary's elevation to heaven, is a clear example of how tradition and ecclesiastical doctrine shape the image and role of religious figures over time. We will examine how this belief was formalized and how it fits into the evolution of Mary's figure. The dogma of the Assumption of Mary, formalized in 1950 by Pope Pius XII, marks a crucial moment in the evolution of Mary's figure in Christian tradition. This dogma states that Mary, after her death, was assumed into heaven, body and soul, a belief that, although ancient, was officially recognized only in the 20th century. It is fascinating how this belief, present in Christian tradition since the early centuries, gained such a recent formalization and how this reflects the way tradition can evolve and adapt over time. The concept of Mary's Assumption, celebrating her elevation to heaven, is an example of how Mary's figure has been increasingly idealized and revered over the centuries. This belief not only highlights Mary's spiritual importance but also reflects the Christian tradition's tendency to confer an almost divine dimension on central figures of faith. It's as if Mary's very nature has been gradually transformed from a human mother to a celestial and protective figure, whose qualities and role transcend earthly limitations. This late formalization of the dogma of the Assumption also leads us to reflect on how beliefs and traditions can develop and change over time. The fact that such a central dogma was officially proclaimed only in 1950 shows that tradition can evolve in unexpected ways, responding to new needs and contexts of the faith community. It's as if tradition is constantly adapting and growing, incorporating new dimensions and perspectives as time progresses. The dogma of the Assumption is a clear example of how tradition and doctrine can be shaped by historical, cultural, and theological factors. It reminds us that, just as Christian tradition evolves and adapts, our own beliefs and practices can also be influenced by changes in context and understanding. Mary's Assumption, therefore, is not just a theological statement but also a reflection of the constant dynamic between tradition, faith, and evolution. Now that we have explored the formalization of the dogma of the Assumption, it is interesting to consider how all these dimensions and aspects of Mary's life intertwine and shape her image and importance in Christian tradition. Understanding these different aspects allows us to more deeply appreciate the complex and multifaceted role of Mary over the centuries. Now that we have uncovered the mysteries and revelations about Mary, the mother of Jesus, it is time to reflect on the profound impact her life and legacy have on our own journeys. Have you considered how the teachings and traditions about Mary might influence your own beliefs and practices? Mary's story reminds us that even in the most venerated figures, there are layers of complexity and meaning that can inspire and guide us. How about applying this knowledge to your own life? Think about how you can integrate the wisdom and values Mary represents into your own choices and actions. Whether seeking more depth in your personal traditions or finding ways to connect with aspects of your spirituality, Mary's life offers a rich source of inspiration and reflection. If you found this exploration fascinating, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more content that uncovers the secrets and teachings of central figures in history and faith. Together, we will continue to explore and understand the stories that shape our beliefs and paths.